On New Year's Eve, Zach Bryan got married in Spain. His bride, Samantha Leonard, gave him a wedding present that would change everything. It was a guitar, not just any guitar, Bob Weir's Telecaster, the one he played on the road for years with the Grateful Dead. 10 days later, on January 10, 2026, Bob Weir passed away at age 78, and Zach Bryan found himself having to release new music on the same day the world lost a legend who profoundly influenced his sound. What Bryan posted on Instagram afterward wasn't just a tribute, it was a window into the soul of country music's biggest star, showing us how the past shapes the present, how love manifests in unexpected ways, and how the death of an icon can remind us what really matters. This is the story of a guitar, a wedding, and a legacy that will never die. Background. Who was Bob Weir? Before we get into Zach Bryan's tribute, you need to understand who Bob Weir was. Because this man wasn't just a musician. He was a force of nature who helped redefine what American music could be. Bob Weir was born Robert Hall Parber in San Francisco in 1947, but he was given up for adoption and raised by Frederick and Eleanor Weir. Growing up in the Bay Area during the 50s and 60s, young Bob was exposed to folk music, blues, and the beginnings of rock and roll. But he was also a bit of a troublemaker, getting kicked out of multiple schools before finding his calling in music. In 1964, when he was just a teenager, Weir met Jerry Garcia and joined a folk music band called Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Champions. But folk wasn't enough. In May 1965, Weir, Garcia, bassist Phil Lesh, keyboard player Ron Pigpen McKernan, and drummer Bill Kritzman formed an electric, blues-based rock and roll band that was briefly called the Warlocks. By the end of 1965, they had a new name, the Grateful Dead. Over the next 3 decades, the Grateful Dead would become one of the most influential and beloved bands in American music history. They didn't just play concerts, they created experiences. They pioneered the jam band genre, where songs could stretch for 20 or 30 minutes, each performance completely unique. They allowed fans to record their shows and trade tapes, building a grassroots following that would grow into a massive multi-generational community known as Deadheads. Weir was the rhythm guitarist, and while Jerry Garcia often took the spotlight with his lead guitar solos, Weir's playing was the backbone of the Dead sound. His distinctive rhythm guitar work, combined with his emotive singing on songs like Truckin' and Sugar Magnolia, made him an essential part of what made the Dead special. He wasn't just standing in Garcia's shadow, he was creating the foundation that allowed Garcia to soar. The Grateful Dead released 13 studio albums, played thousands of sold-out shows all over the world, and built a devoted fan base that followed them from city to city, year after year. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1994, cementing their place in music history. But then, in August 1995, Jerry Garcia died at age 53 from a heart attack in a drug rehabilitation facility. It was devastating. The Grateful Dead officially ended. For many people, that would have been the end of the story. But not for Bob Weir. For 3 more decades after Garcia's death, Weir kept the music alive. He formed new bands. He played with surviving Dead members in various configurations, including The Other Ones, The Dead, Further, and eventually Dead and Company, which featured a younger generation of musicians, including John Mayer on lead guitar. Weir also formed Bobby Weir and Wolfbrox in 2018, a stripped-down outfit featuring bassist and producer Don Was and drummer Jay Lane. Weir was a self-described, compulsive music maker. He couldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. Even when he collapsed on stage in 2013 and later admitted he struggled with addiction to painkillers, he kept going. Music was his life. Performing was his purpose. In July 2025, Weir was diagnosed with cancer. 3 weeks later, he was back on stage at Golden Gate Park in San Francisco for 3 shows celebrating the Grateful Dead's 60th anniversary. He beat the cancer. He powered through those performances, which would turn out to be his final shows. But the underlying lung issues that had plagued him for years caught up with him. And on January 10, 2026, Bob Weir passed away peacefully, surrounded by loved ones. He was 78 years old. The main story, Zach Bryan's tribute. Now let's talk about Zach Bryan, because the timing of everything that happened in mid-January 2026 created one of the most touching moments in recent music history. Zach Bryan is a 28-year-old singer-songwriter from Oklahoma who has become one of the biggest names in country music. His sound is raw, honest, and deeply influenced by folk, Americana, and the kind of storytelling that prioritizes emotion over production. Songs like Something in the Orange and albums like American Heartbreak have earned him a massive following of fans who connect with his authenticity. But Bryan isn't just making music. He's carrying forward a tradition that was shaped by artists like Bob Weir and the Grateful Dead. The influence of that era of music, where authenticity mattered more than polish and connection with the audience was more important than radio hits, runs deep in Bryan's work. On New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2025, Zach Bryan married Samantha Leonard in an intimate ceremony in San Sebastian, Spain. It was a beautiful moment, marking a new chapter in Bryan's life after a very public and difficult breakup with his previous girlfriend. Samantha gave him a wedding present that day, and when Bryan opened it, he was stunned. It was Bob Weir's Telecaster, the guitar Weir had played on the road during his days with the Grateful Dead. Think about that for a second. A Telecaster is already an iconic guitar, made famous by everyone from Bruce Springsteen to Keith Richards. But this wasn't just any Telecaster. This was the one Bob Weir used to create some of the most memorable moments in rock and roll history. And now it belonged to Zach Bryan, given to him by his wife on their wedding day. Fast forward to January 11th, 2026. Bryan had already announced that he was releasing an acoustic version of his brand new album, With Heaven on Top. The original album had been produced with full instrumentation, but Bryan wanted to give his fans something stripped down. Just him, a guitar, a microphone, and the songs in their purest form. He'd promised this acoustic companion piece, and it was scheduled to drop on January 11th. But on January 10th, the day before the release, Bob Weir died. Bryan found himself in an impossible position. He had this album ready to go, fans were expecting it, the release was already planned and promoted. But at the same time, one of his biggest influences had just passed away. How do you move forward with your own project when the music world is mourning a legend? On January 13th, Bryan took to Instagram to address everything. His post was raw, heartfelt, and gave us a glimpse into the kind of person he is. He started by explaining the acoustic album. With Heaven on Top, acoustic is out now, he wrote. This one's for all the weird audiophiles that no matter how much I put into a record, will always miss just a guitar and me. Like I said, it's just me in a room with a mic and guitar and a very pretty girl and a very small dog. Love you guys and hope you enjoy it. Then he addressed Bob Weir's death. Irrelevant, but rest in peace to Bob Weir, that guy fucking rocked. But he didn't stop there. Bryan revealed the story of the wedding present. The day Sammy and me got hitched, she gave me a present and I opened it. And it was his Telecaster from all his days on the road. We all love you and we will all miss you. Reading that, you can feel the weight of the moment. Here's a young artist holding the actual guitar of a man who helped shape the sound of American music, a guitar given to him by his wife on the most important day of his life. And now that man is gone. Bryan concluded by explaining his conflict about the timing of the release. If this wasn't previously planned to release today, I would have left this alone and let the world be. In other words, if he had any control over it, he would have delayed the acoustic album out of respect for Weir. But the release was already locked in, already scheduled. So instead, Bryan honored Weir with his words and his acknowledgement of how much the man meant to him and to music. Analysis. What this all means. So what does this story tell us about music, influence, legacy, and the way young artists connect with the legends who came before them? First, it shows us that influence isn't always obvious or direct. Zach Bryan doesn't sound exactly like the Grateful Dead. He's not a jam band artist. He's not playing 20-minute improvisational songs. But the spirit of what the Dead represented, that commitment to authenticity, that prioritization of connection over commercial success, that willingness to just be yourself on stage, that runs through everything Bryan does. He's carrying forward a tradition, even if the sound is different. Second, this story highlights the power of meaningful gifts. Samantha Leonard could have given her husband anything on their wedding day. She could have bought him something expensive, something flashy, something new. But instead, she found Bob Weir's Telecaster and gave him a piece of music history. That's not just a gift. That's an acknowledgement of who Zach Bryan is as an artist, what matters to him, and what legacy he's trying to uphold. Third, Bryan's response to Weir's death shows us something important about character and respect. He could have just released the acoustic album without saying anything. He could have pretended the timing wasn't awkward. But instead, he acknowledged it head on. He said, "If I had a choice, I would have delayed this." That's integrity. That's someone who understands that music is bigger than his own career. Fourth, this moment reveals how the past and present are always in conversation. Bob Weir died, but his guitar is now in the hands of one of the biggest young stars in country music. The songs Weir wrote and played will live on not just through recordings, but through the artists he influenced. Artists like Zach Bryan, who will carry that spirit forward into the next generation. And finally, this story is about the community that music creates. Deadheads, the devoted fans of the Grateful Dead, have been mourning Weir's death and celebrating his life. Zach Bryan's fans, many of whom may not have been deeply familiar with Bob Weir before this moment, are now learning about him, discovering his music, and connecting the dots between the artist they love and the legend who helped pave the way. Bob Weir's achievements and legacy. Let's take a moment to really celebrate what Bob Weir accomplished in his 78 years, because his legacy is extraordinary. Weir was a founding member of the Grateful Dead and performed with them for 3 decades, from 1965 to 1995. During that time, the band released 13 studio albums, numerous live albums, and played thousands of concerts. They co-wrote some of the most enduring songs in rock history, including Truckin', Sugar Magnolia, and Playing in the Band. But the Dead's impact went far beyond album sales or chart positions. They pioneered a new way of thinking about music and performance. They encouraged fans to record shows and trade tapes, building a grassroots community before the internet existed. They created an entire culture around their concerts, where fans would travel from show to show, creating a nomadic community that lasted for decades. After Jerry Garcia's death in 1995, Weir didn't retire. He kept performing for 3 more decades, playing with various configurations of musicians and keeping the Grateful Dead's music alive for new generations. Dead & Company, which featured John Mayer, introduced the Dead's catalog to millennials and Gen Z fans who weren't even born when Garcia died. Weir was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of the Grateful Dead in 1994. He received Kennedy Center honors in December 2024, shortly after the death of bassist Phil Lesh. His final performances at Golden Gate Park in August 2025, celebrating the Grateful Dead's 60th anniversary, were emotional, soulful, and full of light. According to his family's statement, Weir often spoke of a 300-year legacy, determined to ensure the Grateful Dead's songbook would endure long after him. He imagined those songs being played for generations, hundreds of years into the future. And now, with artists like Zach Bryan carrying forward that spirit, his dream is coming true. Weir is survived by his wife, Natasha Munter, and his 2 daughters, Monet and Chloe. He's also survived by his bandmates Bill Kreutzmann and Mickey Hart, and by countless musicians and fans whose lives were changed by his music. Zach Bryan's achievements and current status. Now let's talk about where Zach Bryan is at this moment in his career, because understanding his current status helps us appreciate the significance of this tribute. Zach Bryan released With Heaven on Top in January 2026, and it immediately became one of the most anticipated albums of the year. The acoustic companion piece, With Heaven on Top, acoustic, dropped on January 11th as promised, giving fans a stripped-down version of the album that showcases Bryan's songwriting and vocal ability without any production polish. Bryan has become one of the defining voices in modern country music, but he's doing it on his own terms. He doesn't sound like mainstream Nashville. He's not chasing radio hits. He's writing songs that are deeply personal, emotionally raw, and musically rooted in folk and Americana traditions. That approach has earned him millions of devoted fans and critical acclaim. His previous albums, including American Heartbreak and The Great American Bar Scene, have been commercial and critical successes. His tours sell out massive venues. His songs have become anthems for a generation of fans who value authenticity over polish. Bryan's marriage to Samantha Leonard on New Year's Eve marked a new chapter in his personal life. After a difficult and very public breakup, Bryan found love again, and the intimacy of their Spanish wedding reflects his desire to keep his private life more protected going forward. The fact that Samantha gave him Bob Weir's Telecaster shows that she understands who her husband is as an artist and what matters to him. That guitar will likely appear on future albums, in future performances, carrying forward the legacy of the man who once played it. Bigger lessons and takeaways. So what can we learn from this story about Zach Bryan, Bob Weir, and the way music connects generations? Lesson 1. Legacy isn't about fame. It's about influence. Bob Weir never had the same level of solo fame as Jerry Garcia, but his impact on music is undeniable. He shaped a sound, helped create a culture, and influenced countless artists. That's legacy. Lesson 2. The most meaningful gifts aren't always the most expensive ones. Samantha Leonard could have bought Zach Bryan anything, but she gave him something with history, with meaning, with soul. That's the kind of gift that lasts forever. Lesson 3. Honoring the past doesn't mean you can't move forward. Bryan released his acoustic album on the day after Weir died. He acknowledged the conflict, paid his respects, and moved forward. That's not disrespectful. That's life. The music never stops. Lesson 4. Authenticity never goes out of style. Both Bob Weir and Zach Bryan built their careers on being real, being themselves, and not compromising their vision for commercial success. That approach has staying power because people can feel when something is genuine. Lesson 5. Community matters more than chart positions. The Grateful Dead never had massive radio hits, but they built a devoted community that has lasted for 6 decades. Zach Bryan is doing the same thing with his fans. That connection is more valuable than any #1 single. Lesson 6. Respect the artists who came before you. Bryan didn't have to mention Bob Weir. He didn't have to acknowledge the influence. But he did, because he understands that he's part of a continuum. Every artist stands on the shoulders of the ones who came before. And finally, Lesson 7. The music really never stops. Bob Weir is gone, but his songs will be played for generations. His guitar is now in the hands of a young artist who will create new music with it. The legacy continues. Conclusion and call to action. Here we are at the end of this journey, and what started as a story about a wedding present has become something much deeper. It's a story about how music connects us across generations, how influence works in ways we don't always see, and how the death of a legend can remind us what really matters. Bob Weir spent 78 years on this earth, and for most of that time, he was making music. He helped create one of the most influential bands in rock history. He kept their legacy alive for 3 decades after Jerry Garcia died. He performed his final shows while battling cancer, giving his fans one last gift before he passed away. That's dedication. That's love. That's what it means to be a true artist. Zach Bryan is 28 years old, at the beginning of what's already shaping up to be an incredible career. He's got Bob Weir's Telecaster now, a wedding gift from his wife, a symbol of the legacy he's carrying forward. Every time he picks up that guitar, he's connected to history. He's connected to the Grateful Dead, to decades of American music, to the spirit of authenticity that defines the best of what music can be. The acoustic version of With Heaven on Top is Bryan's way of giving his fans something pure, something stripped down, something that's just him and a guitar. In a way, it's the perfect tribute to Bob Weir, even though the timing was unintentional, because that's what Weir represented. The idea that you don't need elaborate production or commercial polish. You just need the songs, the voice, and the connection. Now I want to hear from you. Did you know Bob Weir and the Grateful Dead before this story? If so, what's your favorite song of his? If not, are you going to check out his music now? And what do you think about Zach Bryan's tribute? Is he carrying forward that legacy in the right way? Or is modern country music too different from the Dead sound to really be connected? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a conversation about music, legacy, and the way artists influence each other across generations. And if you found this breakdown meaningful, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into the stories that matter in music. Share this with someone who loves the Grateful Dead or someone who's discovering them for the first time through Zach Bryan. Until next time, remember, the music never stops. The legacy continues. And every time a young artist picks up the guitar of a legend, the circle stays unbroken. Rest in peace, Bob Weir. We will all miss you. Peace.